Je anilo premadano karma kacho
Yavanaham yatha bhavo yadrupa guna karmakaha ataiva tattva vijnanam astute mat anugraha
Yadrupa guna karmakaha Jaiva tattva vijnanam Astute madanugraha Yavanaham yatha bhavo Yadrupa guna karmakaha Jaiva tattva vijnanam Astute madanugraha
Yavan, as I am in eternal form. Aham, myself. Yatha, as much as. Bhavaha, transcendental existence. Yat, those. Rupa, various forms and colors. Guna, qualities. Karmakaha, activities. Tata, so and so. Eva, certainly. Tattva vijnanam, factual realization. Astu, let it be. Hey, unto you. Mat, my. Anugraha, by causeless mercy. Is this incense quite empty? It seems to be quite smoky. You don't have to put it out. Well, I'll just keep it there. Put it. Is that for India? I guess everything's from India. Hey, translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. All of me, namely my actual eternal form and my transcendental existence, color, qualities, and activities, let all be awakened within you by factual realization out of my causeless mercy. The secret of success in understanding the intricacies of knowledge of the Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, is the causeless mercy of the Lord. Even in the material world, the father of many sons discloses the secret of his position to the pet sons. The father discloses the confidence unto the son whom he thinks worthy. An important man in the social order can be known by his mercy only. Similarly, one must be very dear to the Lord in order to know the Lord. The Lord is unlimited. No one can know him completely, but one's advancement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord can make one eligible to know the Lord. Here, we can see that the Lord is sufficiently pleased with Brahmaji, and therefore he offers his causeless mercy to him, so that Brahmaji may have the factual realization of the Lord by his mercy only. In the Vedas also it is said, that a person cannot know the absolute truth, personality of Godhead, simply by dint of mundane education or intellectual gymnastics. One can know the supreme truth if one has unflinching faith in the bona fide spiritual master as well as in the Lord. Such a faithful person, even though illiterate in the mundane sense, can know the Lord automatically by the mercy of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita also it is said that the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone, and he keeps himself concealed from the faithless by his yogamaya potency. To the faithful, the Lord reveals himself in his form, quality, and pastimes. The Lord is not formless, as wrongly conceived by the impersonalists, but his form is not like one that we have experienced. The Lord discloses his form even to the extent of measurement to his pure devotees, and that is the meaning of Yavan, as explained by Srila Jiva Goswami, the greatest scholar of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Lord discloses the transcendental nature of his existence. The mundane wranglers make mundane conceptions of the form of the Lord. I think we have an essential walk up, but I'll speak as we go. Is that all right? Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back and start reading and trying to read it and say something. I'll comment as we go. The first three paragraphs first two paragraphs, Prabhupada discusses about how it is by the mercy of the Lord that one can understand his glories. In other words, not by an ascending process, but by a descending process. Certainly that which is beyond the comprehension of our limited senses and intelligence cannot be understood merely by exercise of our intelligence and senses. He is beyond Purusha. He is beyond all of those types of understandings. Simple example Prabhupada gives of a person on a roof doing some carpentry work, and you can try to speculate about what he's doing from beneath the roof inside your house, but unless you have some way of getting up there and seeing, or some similar such information, it is very difficult to know what he's doing. So we are cut off, in a sense, from the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of our own separateness, our separate desires to enjoy have separated us from God. And therefore, at best, we can try to approximate God by understanding things in this world. Krishna gives help in this way. He says everything is great and mighty, it's but a spark of my splendor. So he starts in the 10th chapter of the Gita to describe wonderful things within the material cosmos. Mountains, sharks, thunder, anything that's great. The beginning of the alphabet, right? The end of the alphabet. So many different things, great persons. And all of these are manifestations or sparks of the splendor of God. Anything, because he's the ability of man, and he's the potency with anything. He says, I'm within the atom, I'm everywhere, spread out everywhere. And yet, he says, I'm none of these things. So none of these things means I'm greater than all of this. I'm greater than anything individually, and I'm greater than everything put together. So still, he escapes our comprehension. Because if all we can do is understand him by comparisons with things which are less than him, will never have any understanding ultimately of how great he is. So this is a very difficult thing. To understand God, is really the essence of all religions. And because there has been such a frustration on the part of knowers of the truth in regard to even understanding things within this world fully, finally the questions come, can we even understand God? In other words, those who are trying to endeavor to understand God are turning the whole process of understanding upon itself and questioning what is the basis of our understanding. Cognition. What is the basis of what we know? How do we know that what we know is factual? Or is it just some type of some approximation or some representation? Can we ever actually be aware? This whole thing was started centuries ago by the philosopher Kant, Descartes, who questioned everything based on sense perception. And so nowadays people even question this, but here we see the same issue is being brought up. How do we know? How do we learn? And Krishna, the Supreme Lord, tells Brahma that you won't be able to know by dint of your own abilities alone. And Brahma found that to be true. Right? He tried his best to understand, and he couldn't. He came to a dead end. And then by qualifying himself, not just by sheer mercy, but by his qualifying himself, he received mercy. So that tells you something, that you won't know everything about God except by the grace of God, but you don't get the grace of God without the mercy of God. Brahma qualified himself. And so similarly, we must qualify ourselves, and that's what the process of Krishna Consciousness is all about. We're trying to qualify ourselves to be worthy of Krishna revealing himself to us. Yaya Tamal Krishna Goswami. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So that makes the point, not by merely doing some exercise. Maya Priti. The Gyanis are performing mental gymnastics. They're very intelligent. Just like last time I went to this program, like last night, it's a society of learned persons, basically, scientists and educated psychiatrists. And the keynote speaker was, discussing about God. And of course, he said that everything is God. And, it went on and on. I don't know how much I would want to hear it, but, but basically he came to the conception that the universe is the body of God, and God is the essence which is within the universe, or the essence of the universe, or call God he said our God is a very young God because the universe is very young. It's only so many billions of years old. So he called God a fetal God, just like God's still in the fetal, stage of existence. It's not very old yet. And it went on, and it was pretty, the person sitting next to me was a good friend of our society, a learned person himself, commented, I said, what this man teaches at such and such university, what discipline is he in? The emeritus professor sitting next to me said, well, it's not in my discipline, that's for sure. So I'm not getting much out of this. So, Maya again, this person had certainly a great deal of knowledge. He was drawing from so many different disciplines, from math, and from science, physics, and from chemistry, and from biology, and from theology. And he was drawing from many, many different things to put together his picture of God. But it wasn't the picture as we have it at all. Because he can't on his own figure out what God is. He's trying his best, and so have all the others, and they fail. And therefore they keep updating their theories, right? God is like this, God is like that. Nothing is absolute, everything is relative to their conception. So as human beings change their conceptions of reality, they feel that they have a right to change their view about what God is, without ever considering that God may be his own reality, which is completely outside of our, whether we, understand him or think about him. Just like, you may say that I exist only in your mind, but while supposing I'm not in your mind and I'm eating prasad and experiencing my eating of prasad, that means I have no existence because you're not thinking of me. If we, consider that reality is only what's in our mind, then it's a very strange world we're living in. What kind of a reality is this? It just happens that we relate with each other. We have a relationship where the two people happen to recognize each other. Otherwise, we don't really exist. And if I'm only existing when I'm in your mind, what does that mean? There's a lot of people's mind. I might be in your mind, but I might not be in someone else's mind. So what does that mean? I only exist in terms of you, but I don't exist in terms of them. The whole thing is very strange. Even if I'm not in your mind and I come after you with a knife, somehow or other, non-existent me may be the end of existing you. And so the whole thing is very peculiar, but things have gotten to such a stage now where science has demonstrated its abilities technologically to make people in awe of science. And as a consequence, when they come out with various theories, people think, no, since they're able to manipulate the material energy and produce wonderful results. As this man said, there's really no difference between technology and magic and miracle, which is not exactly true. But the point is that, and he said that what was formerly known as miracles will one day be able to be done. Already so many things are done, just like flying was considered a miracle, or passing through the water, making the waters part. With technology, they can do all these things now. And so every miracle will gradually be duplicated. And he went on and on. I mean, I've read all of these things already, so I haven't heard anything new. I didn't hear anything about this stuff. But it certainly proves the point Maya again, that the person's intelligence is stolen by illusion. People don't want to connect understanding with discipline. But in our process, we make a definite direct connection. We say that it's only based on how disciplined you are, how much of a disciple you are, that you receive transcendental knowledge. And disciple implies guru. You have to have a guru. I was listening to a lecture this morning in Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was, answering questions from Bhagavan's journal. I guess last week when I lectured, he was still doing that. There's 3 tapes, so I was 2 on one side of each tape every day. So I'm listening to the last side of the 3rd tape. Maybe it was 4 tapes. Where he's answering, the person's asking, what about a guru? How do you recognize a guru? The Prabhupada says that, you have to, there's no point of, you have to accept a genuine guru and hear from him. And that's the process of receiving transcendental knowledge. Otherwise, you get cheated. So obviously, this person heard from so many gurus so many teachers, but they were not in a lineage in which they had received transcendental knowledge. In other words, he was in a speculative lineage. His guru was a speculator. His gurus were speculators, and so they trained him to be a speculator. And our process is very different. We're not trained to speculate. In fact, we say that mental speculation is a form of gambling. It's prohibited, which disturbs people because they say, well, then you're just a zombie. But again, we have to question whether, that which is beyond mundane comprehension can be understood by speculation, or is it understood by revelation? We say it's understood by revelation. The truth, the absolute truth, is revealed. That's the whole point of this verse, that Krishna says to Brahma, that you will now get full knowledge of me, Vijnana, the realization of me by my mercy. That's revelation. And it doesn't just come to any fool. It comes to a qualified person. So our whole process is trying to prepare ourselves for such mercy, for such revelation. And it's not easy, because this is not a small revelation. It's such big, Gyanis can't get it. It must be a really powerful type of understanding. And so one has to be qualified. And that qualification is to become sympathetic to Krishna. As Prabhupada, as we were reading, the Jackfruit was reading this morning from Purjan's book, right? That the whole process is to learn how to be a servant, not a master. This man was saying, he was admitting I have, a very narcissistic, tendency, because, he was saying there's nothing that we can't do one day. We will be able to do everything. One woman raised her hand and said, well, right now, I'm just, I have a brain which is conscious, but when my life is over, my brain is just going to deteriorate, and that's the end of me. And of course, he gave her some hope. Suddenly, he turned that feeble God. He said, well, God is also very old, and he will care for us. And in his care, he will eventually be able to he said that eventually people will be able to, what you are is information. He said, you're information. And that information is never lost. Of course, he didn't explain where it was stored, but I suppose he would have said it will be stored in God, whatever God is. And one day, persons will be able to reconstitute your individual existence. They will, because you have a specific set of information, and that is never lost, and it can be reconstituted. And that's the, bodily ascension or bodily resurrection. I mean, it was pretty, it was really science fiction. This was like science fiction at its best. And again, I've read that, in that book, Reason of Belief, I may have even mentioned that that's one of the ways in which people theorize that, you can overcome death, is that there will be a time in the future when individuals can be resurrected, recreated, because the information is never lost. They say that you can, all of what you are, just like now they clone, right, based on information. They can duplicate it. So they can duplicate it. They know your exact genetic structure. One day they'll just duplicate it and recreate it. So, Prabhupada's point was this morning, we need a bona fide guru if we're going to understand knowledge about Krishna. And that kind of Ishvara Bhav, the mentality that I am the supreme controller, I am the supreme God, I play like God, is the exact opposite of the qualification for receiving God's mercy. Whereas to be a servant, to be a humble person who serves the will of God, that's the qualification. Prabhupada says the Father reveals himself and his secrets to his pet son. So we want to become like pet children, right? Become childlike. A pet child does whatever the parents want. So we should be prepared to do whatever whatever Krishna wants as it's instructed to us through our spiritual master and the saints of Vaishnavas, spiritual authorities. We should be prepared. Whatever that may be. Just like Arjuna stood through such a test, he was a pet child in a sense. He was asked to do a very difficult deed, to fight in a battle in which he had to slay so many dear ones. And I think it's a wonderful example because none of us will ever have to do what Arjuna had to do. I mean, we just won't have to do it. We're not going to do it. To slay those who are dear to us, teachers, our grandfather, our cousins, uncles, even his brother, right? His elder brother he killed. Kana killed everyone. Bhishma, Drona, Karna. It's just, it's what he had to do. We won't have to do. But he did this on the basis that this was Krishna's desire. And it wasn't whimsical. Krishna's desires aren't whimsical. These persons acted very religiously. Krishna's desire was established through religion. So when we are told that we should just do whatever Krishna wants, we're told that it's because Krishna wants religion to be established. And it's our duty to establish religion by serving Krishna faithfully. That does establish religion. Just like it's a religious principle, for example, to come and see the deity every day. That is dharma. If you live this close to God and you don't see Him, it's offensive. It's an offense to disregard the Guru's instruction and to break vows and promises. We promise Krishna to chant so many rounds. So it's incumbent upon us to maintain and fulfill that vow. This is how you become a pet child. And Krishna reciprocates. And what is his reciprocation? To reveal himself. So now that's discussed here. The Lord discloses the transcendental nature of his existence. The mundane wranglers make mundane conceptions of the form of the Lord. It is said in the revealed scriptures that the Lord has no mundane form. Therefore, persons with a poor fund of knowledge conclude that he must be formless. They cannot distinguish between the mundane form and the spiritual form. According to them, without a mundane form, one must be formless. This conclusion is also mundane because formlessness is the opposite conception of form. Negation of the mundane conception does not establish a transcendental fact. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that the Lord has a transcendental form and that he can utilize any one of his senses for any purpose. For example, he can eat with his eyes, and he can see with his leg. In the mundane conception of form, one cannot eat with one's eyes or see with his leg. That is the difference between the mundane body and the spiritual body of Samchit Ananda. A spiritual body is not formless, it is a different type of body, of which we cannot conceive with our present mundane senses. Formless, therefore, means devoid of mundane form, or possessing a spiritual body of which the non-devotee can have no conception by the speculative method. There's a nice story told by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in this regard. Once, it's called the story of the Magistrate and the Jackfruit. Have you heard this story? Anybody? The story about the Magistrate and the Jackfruit. During the British Raj, there was a magistrate, very impressive fellow. He had long beard, hair, full head of hair, and he would come into the court, and his decisions were feared by everyone in Calcutta. And he had a Bengali servant, although normally he had very little contact with the Bengalis because, the British kept to their own society, but they had servants who were in the Bengalis. So one day, one of his servants asked him if he had ever experienced the taste of jackfruit. And he hadn't, I guess he was more into eating the things which Britishers eat. And jackfruit was too exotic a fruit. Have any of you ever eaten jackfruit? Well, not too many people. Okay. Anyway, it's a very lush fruit, especially when it's ripe. So he said, no, I haven't. So the servant left him a big jackfruit on a plate with a knife. And the fellow went to court. And, if you're out at the court, everyone in the court should rise. They all rose up when he entered and showed him respect. And he dealt out certain judgments and then retired during lunch break and found the jackfruit on the plate with a knife. So he cut it open, cut it in half, and found the inside. And of course, it has this very thick type of sticky substance in between the kernels. And the kernels are what you want to eat. But not knowing how to eat it, he started to eat it, and he liked it. It was very sweet. And when he went to wash, though, he found that his hair and beard was filled with all this sticky substance. And he's trying to wash it out, but it didn't come out. And of course, he started to get a little panicky because he tried washing, trying to get it wouldn't come out. So he rang for his servant, and the servant came and he said, what is this that you have given me? And the servant looked and he said, oh, you ate the wrong parts of the jackfruit. You ate all the sticky substance and you left the kernels, which is the part you're supposed to eat. You're supposed to reject it. And he said, well, do something. And he said, there's nothing you can do. When it gets in the hair, it won't come out. Once it comes into the hair, it becomes impossible. It hardens into the hair. You can't get it out. And that's a fact. You can't get it out. Because this is not just a false story. So the magistrate was, he was becoming panicky because the time of the lunch was getting over and he had to go back to the courtroom. So he said, what should I do? And then he realized that the only thing he was going to do was to shave his beard and hair. So he told the man that you better bring a barber, but you both have to take an oath that you will never tell anyone why I shaved. So getting them both there and making them take this oath, the barber shaved off all his hair and he came back into the courtroom. Lo and behold, here was this magistrate completely bald-headed with no beard. So the first person who was on trial in the afternoon was one Bhattacharya, who had, there had been death in the family, and he was also shaved up. So when the magistrate saw him, he started to smile. And he adjourned the trial and told the Bhattacharya to come and see me from the back room. And the Bhattacharya, of course, was completely petrified, thinking that, they told him when his lawyer heard this, the barrister said, you're finished now. And this man, who won't even take the case, he's going to do something terrible. So Mr. Bhattacharya was shaking practically in his sandals when he came back there. And then when he came in, the magistrate said, and he started to laugh like anything. He said, I know. He said, no, nobody else knows, but I know why you have shaved your head. So Mr. Bhattacharya couldn't come. He was going to explain to him, well, yes, he felt that he was going to commiserate with the death, but the magistrate said, the same thing happened to me today. I was eating the jackfruit, and the juices went all through my beard and hair, and I had to shave up, and he was laughing. He said, I understand exactly how you feel. And he gave him 50 rupees, and he said, you're dismissed. You don't have to come back to the court. Feeling pity him. So, the moral, what is the moral of the story? Bhaktivedanta Swami gives the moral that people are very foolish. They know how foolish they are. Just like this magistrate realized that he was a very big fool. He realized that. People are very foolish, and so when they see something that resembles them, they immediately conclude that that person is also foolish. And Bhaktivedanta Swami, in other words, was relating to the verse, Avajananti Mudha Anushintam Harshvatam Parambhavam Janantam Amabuddha Maheshwara. Foolish persons deride me when I descend in human-like form. In other words, they compare my human-like form to their own form. And because they think that they're a product of, their body is a product of matter, they conclude that my body is a product of matter. So you can't understand Krishna, as Prabhupada is trying to bring out here. You can't understand the Satchidananda form of the Lord by any mundane comparison. You have to hear it from the transcendental authority. There's no other way to understand it. Prabhupada goes on, the Lord discloses to the devotees his unlimited varieties of transcendental bodies, all identical with one another with different kinds of bodily features. Some of the transcendental bodies of the Lord are blackish, some of them are whitish, some of them are reddish, and some are yellowish. Some of them are four-handed, and some of them two-handed. Some of them are like the fish, some are like the lion. All these different transcendental bodies of the Lord, without any differential category, are disclosed to the devotees of the Lord by the mercy of the Lord. And thus the impersonalists' false arguments claiming the formlessness of the Supreme Truth do not appeal to a devotee of the Lord, even though such a devotee may not be very advanced in devotional service. The Lord has unlimited numbers of transcendental qualities, and one of them is his affection for his unalloyed devotee. In the history of the mundane world, we can appreciate his transcendental qualities. The Lord incarnates himself for the protection of his devotees and for the annihilation of the faithless. His activities are in relationship with his devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of such activities of the Lord in relationship with his devotees, and the non-devotees have no knowledge of such pastimes. The Lord lifted the Govardhan hill when he was only 7 years old, and protected his pure devotees at Vrindavan from the wrath of Indra, who was overflooding the place with rain. Now this lifting of the Govardhan hill by a 7-year-old boy may be unbelievable for the faithless, but for the devotees it is absolutely believable. The devotee believes in the almighty potency of the Lord, while the faithless say that the Lord is almighty, but do not believe it. Such men, with a poor fund of knowledge, do not know that the Lord is the Lord eternally, and that one cannot become the Lord by meditation for millions of years or by mental speculation for billions of years. The impersonalist interpretation of the mundane wranglers is completely refuted in this verse, because it is clearly stated here that the Supreme Lord has his qualities, form, pastimes, and everything that a person has. All these descriptions of the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead are factual realizations by the devotee of the Lord, and by the causeless mercy of the Lord, they are revealed by his pure devotee and to no one else. They are revealed to his pure devotee and to no one else. Any questions?
Whenever we talk of mercy, we always use the word causeless mercy. So, causeless mercy would mean a mercy without cause. And yet we find that mercy is dependent on qualification.
Yes, but it doesn't really, because causeless mercy is causeless in the sense that although it is given to everyone, not everyone appreciates it. In other words, just like the rain falls everywhere, on concrete as well as on ground, grass. But the grass has the ability to make use of the rain, whereas the concrete does not. So our qualification, or qualifying ourselves, is to be able to appreciate the mercy. As far as the mercy goes, there's nothing particular that we can do which makes us deserve it. But rather, it is the effort that we apply which makes us able to appreciate the mercy. So that's the distinction. Another question? Yeah.
Regarding this Jackfruit story, I have an incident in the army where one of the recruits who just newly joined, he was telling the officer who was in charge, actually the jackfruit seed can also be eaten. If you boil it, it's very tasty, you can eat it. So you can eat the seed of the jackfruit. So he prepared this preparation, he put all the seeds and boiled it in water with the seeds in there and gave it to the officer. And the officer drank the water and threw away the seeds. So this shows that even people who are seemingly exalted in material position are very ignorant in many ways. So it was a joke in the whole platoon. After that, we used to keep on saying that incident whenever we see that officer.
Another question? Yes, Ramachandra.
Did you say otherwise ultimate mercy means that it doesn't have a material form?
Causeless mercy doesn't have a material cause. Yes, and that's no material cause. But it also doesn't have specific. In other words, it's not simply that it has no material cause. The point is that note that considering the gift that Krishna is giving, considering the gift that God gives, there's nothing that we can do which makes us worthy of such a gift. That's saying that Krishna said the same about the redemptive nature of Jesus' appearance. There's nothing that warrants such mercy. I mean, Paul says that we're such sinners that we are totally sinful. So God, sending his own son and even sacrificing his own son, it's inconceivable how much mercy is given when we are only sinful. So rather than saying simply that there's no material cause, the fact is that we, no matter what, we will never be worthy of the mercy given. Still, by the grace of God, we become worthy. In other words, how does one become worthy? If we leave aside persons who descend directly from the spiritual world or eternal associates of the world, how does a sadhaka become worthy? Constantly by receiving mercy, isn't it? I mean, you can say, which comes first, the mercy or your worthiness? Devotees say to their spiritual master, you picked me out of the material ocean, right, of existence. You extended your causeless mercy to me. And by your mercy, then I developed certain qualification, which then made me an object of your further mercy. So it does seem that we should give the cause, the first cause, to Krishna and his representatives, rather than to our own selves. And that's the point that we made. Not that, causeless mercy means there's no material cause, but I have lots of spiritual causes which cause you to give me mercy.
In the West, we had no qualification for Prabhupada to come to us. And even those who we spoke to first, the uptown people and the so-called yogis, they couldn't receive his mercy because they didn't follow his instructions. Those who took seriously to follow his instructions became, as you say, more qualified to receive more and more mercy.
That's your brother.
In New York, told us that this Krishna Consciousness movement is eternally here. Others is 6. Both of those phrases are
Eternally conditioned, nitya siddha, eternally liberated, perfect. What's your question?
Well, how could you ever
Nitya Vada means that there is no beginning to when we cannot remember the time, when we are not conditioned. And we cannot imagine the time when we will not be. That's called Nityabhata. And Nityasiddha means that we cannot remember the time. The person cannot, or there's no way to conceive of when the person was not perfect from either side, eternal. So the question is, how does one turn from a Nityabhata to a Nityasiddha? That's by the Buddha. But now you can say, well, that defies logic. What you want is you're asking a logical question. But mercy can intercede in such a circumstance. In other words, although you are meant to be eternally bound, and there's nothing you can do which would stop you from being bound on your own strength, the Lord can intercede with your karma within your life and transform you and set you on a different principle of becoming eternally perfect. In other words, your argument, the question is similar to saying that there can't be any miracles, because miracles, by their definition, are they are a entry into the natural order. They are a discontinuation of the natural order. A miracle is when the natural order is contravened. So natural order is never contravened, according to mundane consideration. It's like dropping a ball, dropping a weight, it goes down, it doesn't go up. And no matter how many times you drop it, it won't, unless there's some other force which makes it go. But generally speaking, it will not generally, it doesn't go by nature, it does not go up, it goes down. So similarly, by nature, those who are bound will remain bound. But Krishna says that those who surrender unto me, that I can change them. It's impossible. So, Maya may come to them, although it is very difficult to get free from the bound condition. If you surrender unto Krishna, it says, then I will help you to cross over. So if we say that, a weight will go downwards, or it will go downwards unless there's something even stronger force pulling it the other way, that's exactly what we're talking about. That God is that powerful force who can intercede in the destiny of the eternally bound jivas and make them eternally liberated, perfect. And that's called mercy. He interferes. He intercedes.
What's the difference between grace and mercy?
I don't think offhand there's a difference. But Christian
Grace is, at least in Christian God, a state. You need a state of grace, whereas mercy is like a flow, pouring out of kindness. And if you are very fortunate to get the kindness, then you get that grace. By entering in that state of grace, then we can give it, be merciful to others. Without being that, getting that, you can't give it.
Any other questions? Yes, Nirvana.
Whenever Krishna was coming to the Duryodhana to try to stop the battle, that's when the Pandavas were the kingdom of Matsya. He showed some form to Duryodhana. I think it was described as universal form.
Yeah.
It's pretty much similar to, but Duryodhana was not angry. Is that an example of Cosmos mercy being there for the person?
Yeah, Krishna came to Duryodhana, tried to stave off the war, showed him the universal form of sorts, and still Duryodhana could not appreciate Krishna's position. What was the reason?
Envious.
Yeah, he's envious. That's why in the 9th chapter, beginning, right, the most confidential knowledge of the Bhaktivedanta, first verse, Krishna says to Arjuna, I'm going to give you this knowledge because of you being non-envious of me. So envy has brought us in this world. And non-envy, getting over that envy will get us out. Therefore, envy is really a very, very problematic nature to have, to be envious, to be jealous.
It is the sadhana bhakti does not attract Krishna. The sadhana bhakti
Sadhana bhakti does not attract Krishna. Well, it doesn't say that it doesn't attract Krishna, but it's not strong enough in itself to attract Krishna. To say that it doesn't attract Krishna would be also not 100% true. But go ahead.
And Radha-nuga bhakti is very rare. So how do we progress from sadhana to Radha-nuga? What is taken to?
Yeah, I think you have the confusion of the. Normally, the description is given Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. There's three. There's the beginning stages of Bhakti, then Bhava Bhakti, then Prema Bhakti. Prema Bhakti is Krishna Consciousness. It attracts Krishna. And in the Bhava, that is very rare. What are the two Bhavas?
Vaidhi and Raganuga.
No, but I'll get to that also. Do you remember? Huh? Anybody remember?
There's six things. The beginning and metric notions are one of them is very rarely achieved.
Yeah, but which stages is that? Which is the stage that is very rarely achieved? Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. It may be Prema Bhakti. Huh? Okay, Prema Bhakti. Let's go with that. Prema Bhakti, let's say, is very rarely achieved and attracts Krishna. These are its two specific qualities. Bhava Bhakti minimizes the value of liberation, and just so many years ago that anyway, I forget it. But so now the question is, like you've asked, so I wanted to make the point that you're using a description that it's very rarely achieved. But normally that very rarely achieved is described in Prema Bhakti. And Raganuga Bhakti is a form of sadhana. Raganuga Bhakti is also part of sadhana Bhakti. There's Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti. And they're both within the category of sadhana Bhakti. And Prema Bhakti is the goal of both. And Prema Bhakti, if we get it right, is very rarely achieved. So, but the point is that of the two, Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti is said to be stronger because it does not, it is based on more spontaneity. Now, Prabhupada in his purport states that in the process of Krishna consciousness that we follow, the Vaidhi Bhakti will gradually lead to Raganuga Bhakti. And in fact, he also says something else. He says, he equates Raganuga Bhakti with liberated condition, which means at least beyond the stage of anartha nivritti, or having achieved at least some form of initial strong faith. In other words, he says, when the material nature of desires have more or less ceased. I'm saying more or less because it says that even in the stage of bhava there may be some slight, like in the case of Maharaj, who fell down, that he fell down because there was some slight tinge. So, using the point that Prabhupada says that, we have to vanquish material desires, practically vanquish them, more or less, more than less. But most of them, nearly all material desires should have been vanquished. One should be in a liberated condition, Prabhupada says, then this platform of Raganuga Bhakti will manifest itself very naturally. Because there are many things within our process which lead to that. There are many things. The Srimad Bhagavatam itself is a very, the Bhagavatam living in Vrindavan, chanting the holy names, worshipping the deity, the association of advanced Vaishnavas, the performance of Sankirtan, and probably more than any single thing, which most people, who are into these types of things ignore, but which Prabhupada gave the greatest emphasis to. The preaching mood itself, as a whole, is extremely conducive to spontaneous feelings. Because what is the basis of spontaneous feelings? Giving up envy, giving up selfishness and egoism. That's the basis of material contamination. What gets you to that position most quickly, being free from those things, is the unavoided preaching mood. The preaching mood draws out of you the greatest. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is known for his mood of audarya, of compassion, of preaching. It draws the best out of you and brings you to that, ocean of transcendental knowledge and bliss. So, by this process that we've been given, we will come to that stage, which is, as you say, and that is a very rarely, then it gradually comes to bhava and prema. But it will come in that way. Rather than, Prabhupada does not encourage, the idea of trying to envision or imagine your relationship with Krishna prematurely, which is what the Babaji's system is. That's from the beginning, you get disclosed to you your eternal rasa with Krishna, and you meditate on it. They call that Raga Bhakti. But that's not the system that Prabhupada has given us. That's not the system, which is what Prabhupada states is the actual system. That it's supposed to come naturally, developed out of the purity of your heart. Not that you use that system to purify your heart. Although it does do the final work of purification. But the gross forms of contamination are not suitable for being diminished by the process of Raganuga. Prabhupada says for that you should use the process of Bhakti. And when all of that gross contamination is removed, then it's possible to contemplate properly in the method of Raganuga.
So what this God Brother Prabhupada is doing is not...
It's not a Gandhara. It's a personal Gandhara. He's a disciple of Prabhupada.
So what he's doing, going around...
I don't know why he does that. He feels that it's work for him and it will work for us. That's his conviction. But I would say that Prabhupada's recognition or realization of what is appropriate is probably more accurate. Now, Prabhupada, I think, is more accurate. And I think Prabhupada has the power to judge. And I think Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is empowered to judge what is the proper process for purifying people in this age. And they did not, speak very freely about these matters. They did not recommend practice like this. So it's definitely a difference in the preaching strategy. And of course, one tells by the results. You have to judge by the results. And it's very difficult to judge by the results of saying, well, someone has more love than somebody else. Because the process that we learn from Prabhupada to determine whether someone has love for Krishna is how much they're willing to take up the work of Krishna. Freeing people from contamination.
So in the beginning, is it possible for us to really preach out of compassion?
Preaching itself is a compassion act. In other words, it's like your question is, do you have to feel something to do it properly? Obviously you don't. You do a lot of things that you don't feel like doing.
Well,
You go to work every day and drive that taxi. Do you feel like doing it? No, you do it. And because it'll get you the results you want, you'll make some money from it. And it works that way. And so sometimes you may feel or not feel. But if you act properly, then gradually the feeling will come.
Well, we read in the scriptures that it says devotional service can be done in the three different modes: compassion, goodness, and ignorance. So, is it possible that preaching can also be done in the mode of passion?
Sure, of course it is. Prabhupada criticized the preachers when they would turn people off, for example. Sometimes out of overzealousness, our book distributors would just, make people furious at them. Now, I think those book distributors were certainly preaching, but they are obviously not preaching in a pure mode of goodness. They were preaching with too much passion or even ignorance. I mean, I remember some of those preachers, like their so-called preaching was to list off 30 names of rock groups. And hand somehow they'd meet a young man and they'd get him a book and they'd start naming off all these rock groups. And they asked for a donation, as if somehow, I don't know what the connection is, but they had a connection. Well, that's not exactly transcendental. Managee's questions? Okay, it is getting late. Today's Ekadasi, remember, to follow the Ekadasi fasting today. And don't eat in Dhaka for the longest time. Everybody was thinking Satya Ekadasi meant you're supposed to eat sesame seeds. And in fact, there are Brajavasis who do that. But that's not correct. In the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says that sesame seeds are grain. Sesame seeds and what was the other? Well, when we do the yajna, the fire sacrifice, we offer grains in the fire. What are the grains? Barley and sesame seeds. So don't eat sesame seeds on this day. Are there any other questions about which things are like grains? Huh? Fenugreek is a seed, isn't it? Huh?
It's a grain.
It's a grain. Okay, so don't use fenugreek seeds. Any other things?
Turmeric is mixed with wheat flour.
Well, in other words, you have to be careful that the source of turmeric is pure. Otherwise, it's not that all turmeric is mixed with wheat flour. It means what you're saying is that what you're buying is cut. The same thing as with the aspartame, right? They often cut it with some, right? Grain, because it's expensive in its pure form. So you have to be cautious not to use things which are cut with grain. Or another one is corn syrup. If you take a drink or something which has a sweetener, you have to be sure that the sweetener is not made from corn syrup. Any other things? Yes.
I read somewhere.
Are you going to say some other things?
No, I'm talking about the Ekadasi thing.
Oh, okay.
At one time, this Magistrate went to Prabhupada Swami and said, Prabhupada, we cannot use this aspartame because it's lame. Prabhupada was very upset. Said, why do you want to make things so difficult? The Ekadasi means no chapati, no rice, no diet.
I agree with you. I'm glad Bhaktivedanta Krishna will say this out loud so you get the credit on the taking history. Has brought the point that, was it Jamuna? Mother Jamuna who went to Prabhupada? Someone went to Prabhupada and said that Prabhupada, we can't use aspartame because it has grain. And Prabhupada said, why do you want to make this so difficult? No grains means no chapatis, no dal. Yeah, I agree with you. In other words, I think that that's basically true. In other words, these are, some minor discrepancy. Like supposing, that it's a minor discrepancy, it's not such a big thing. But I think also that Prabhupada, for example, I asked Prabhupada Vrindavan, would it be good to completely fast even from drinking water on Ekadasi? Prabhupada said if you can do it, it's very good. So it's not that he did not like. I mean, one thing we have to be cautious that there are millions of Prabhupada says which are even contradictory. Prabhupada answered questions according to time, place, and circumstance. Who it was, what mood he was in. I mean, there were some of the issues, not just the absolute truth. There were many considerations. So, I guess the point I'm making is that if you can, we should not be so fanatical, but then again, if we notice something, for example, supposing you knew for a fact that there was wheat in the asafoetida, would you go ahead and put it in anyone? I wouldn't. If I knew something was like that, just like, I use, Mother Kumoni makes this hand lotion, right? So we switched to an oil. It's made this time, normally I make it with, I forget the apricot oil, which I can use on the condensate, but now the oil that she put in it is jojoba oil, which is a grain. So now I'm not going to use it today. I just don't want to touch the grains. I don't want to use it, that's all. Maybe it'll go in my body. It doesn't supposed to go in my body. What's the point of using that? Unfortunately, it doesn't work. It doesn't go in my body. That's not a very good thing. Not her fault, it's the formula. It's Durashak's fault, because he's fanatically following this book about, what's it called, the cure of all diseases. The cures, there are replacements for practically everything. You can replace everything. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I'm not following that. The one thing the scientists said yesterday evening, which was nice, was that every 7 years the whole body changes. Every part of it changes. I thought that was good. Because usually you hear that some brain cells don't change, but he said every part changes. I don't know, he may have just been generalized. So it's nice to hear those kind of statements of God confirmed by mundane people, so that we know that this is a commonly known fact. You can tell people. Okay, we'll stop now. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Lord Bhaktivedanta